One of the clearest signs that someone is extremely jealous of you is this: they imitate you, but they never celebrate you. They watch you closely, not to learn from you in the spirit of humility, but to mirror your every move in the shadows, hoping to match your steps while secretly resenting the path God has placed you on. They study the way you speak, the way you carry yourself, even the way you treat others, but their heart isn't filled with admiration, it's filled with comparison, and comparison, when left unchecked, becomes a breeding ground for jealousy. You see, jealousy isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with angry words or obvious sabotage. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, dressed up in imitation. They might follow your lead or echo your words, mirror your habits, and yet never once say, "I'm proud of you." Never once say, "What you did inspired me." Because their imitation isn't about respect, it's about competition. It's about trying to carry your crown without earning your cross, and that's a dangerous game to play. People who are truly secure in themselves can celebrate others. They can say, "Look at what God is doing in her life. Look at how far he's come." But jealousy keeps the mouth closed when it should be praising and opens it only to criticize or compete. They see your light, and instead of letting it illuminate them, they try to steal it. They try to copy the way God is blessing you, as if mimicking your fruit can produce the same harvest. But fruit doesn't grow from imitation, it grows from cultivation, from obedience, prayer, discipline, and patience. You had to go through some things to become who you are, and someone jealous of you will try to bypass the process and imitate the product. They'll take your words but not your wisdom. They'll mimic your style but not your struggle. They want the outcome, but they don't want the obedience that birthed it. They want the influence, but not the integrity. They want the applause, but not the anointing. And when they fail to become you because God never made two of you, they'll start to resent you even more. Have you ever noticed someone who copies everything you do but never acknowledges you, never says thank you, never says you helped me become better? That's not admiration, that's envy. Because jealousy refuses to honor the vessel. It wants the oil without respecting the jar. It wants the treasure without acknowledging the price. So they imitate in silence and refuse to celebrate in public. Because acknowledging you would mean accepting that God placed something special on your life, and that's what jealousy can't stand. That God chose you, that He called you, that He blessed you, and it burns in their heart, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your obedience reveals their disobedience. Your purpose reveals their insecurity. Your progress exposes their procrastination. And so they try to become like you instead of becoming like Christ. But here's what I want you to understand: you don't have to shrink to make someone else feel comfortable. You don't have to stop growing just because they're choking on the dust of your footsteps. God didn't bless you to be hidden. He didn't pour oil on your head so you could play small to protect the fragile pride of those who refuse to heal. If they want what you have, let them seek the God who gave it. Let them do the work. Let them pray the prayers. Let them suffer the storms. Let them carry the cross, not just copy the crown. And don't let it shake you. Don't let it make you bitter. Don't let it steal your joy when they imitate you without honoring you. Don't let it harden your heart. Stay humble, stay faithful, stay obedient, because what's on your life isn't for imitation, it's for impact, and only those who walk with God in truth can carry it with grace. Keep shining, keep growing, keep going, because no matter how many try to replicate your steps, they can't replicate your spirit. What's inside of you didn't come from this world, it came from above. Let them watch, let them copy, but never let them distract you from the assignment God has given you. Because when God places His hand on you, no imitation can ever take your place. One of the most telling signs that someone is deeply jealous of you is how they respond to your success. You see, they won't always come out and say they're jealous. No, that would be too obvious. Instead, they'll hide their envy behind smiles and words that sound kind but cut deep. They'll say things like, "You just got lucky," or "It's not that big of a deal," or anyone could have done that. On the surface, it sounds casual, maybe even harmless, but if you listen closely, you'll hear the truth in the tone. That's not support, that's subtle sabotage. That's their way of shrinking your success down to something they can live with. It hurts, doesn't it, to finally reach a mountaintop only to hear someone tell you it's just a small hill, to see the fruit of years of labor, prayer, and tears, and then hear someone casually dismiss it like it was handed to you without cost. But that's what jealousy does. It cannot handle the light you carry, so it tries to dim it. It cannot celebrate your elevation, so it tries to minimize it. It cannot confront the grace of God on your life, so it criticizes the way it shows up. But let me remind you of something. Your success is not accidental. You didn't stumble into your purpose. You didn't just get lucky. You paid a price for this. You sowed in silence. You obeyed when no one was watching. You trusted God through the lonely seasons. You cried in the dark when the world thought you were fine. You sacrificed. You surrendered, and you stayed when others quit. So when someone tries to downplay what God has done in your life, don't you dare let their small mind reduce the size of your breakthrough. Some people can't give you genuine praise because your rise confronts their lack of growth. Your discipline convicts their delay. Your favor reminds them of the faith they never activated. And so, to protect their pride, they dress up their bitterness in sarcasm and small talk. They act indifferent about what God is doing for you, but deep down it bothers them. Because you become what they told themselves they would become someday, and now that your someday has arrived, they have to sit in the discomfort of knowing that they chose comfort while you chose calling. Sometimes the people who should be clapping for you the loudest are the ones who remain silent the longest, not because they didn't see your journey, but because they did. And seeing you win reminds them of every excuse they've ever made for not trying. So rather than deal with that truth, they try to pull you down just enough to feel taller. They won't say, "Congratulations," but they'll say, "Not everyone thinks that's a big deal." They won't say, "Well done," but they'll ask, "Are you sure that's going to last?" They won't say, "I'm proud of you," but they'll say, "I just don't want you to get too full of yourself." And you've got to be careful in those moments because the enemy will use their words to get into your spirit. He'll whisper, "Maybe they're right. Maybe you haven't done anything special. Maybe you should tone it down. Maybe you should stop trying so hard." But that's a lie. You didn't come this far to question your worth because someone else can't see it. You didn't fight battles behind closed doors to let a few words make you forget how far you've come. People who are for you will lift you. They'll speak life. They'll remind you of the cost and celebrate the reward. They won't need to compete or compare because they understand that the God who blessed you is the same God who can bless them. But those who are secretly jealous will try to praise you with one hand and push you down with the other. Their compliments are conditional, their support selective, and their tone always just a little off. That's not love, that's resentment hiding in plain sight. So what do? You keep going, you keep building, you keep giving God the glory, because when He raises you up, no backhanded comment can bring you down. Your value doesn't come from their validation. Your calling doesn't need their confirmation, and you were chosen, set apart, and sent forward by a power far greater than their opinion. Let them talk. Let them twist your success into something small. Let them pretend your journey was easy, but deep down they know the truth, and the truth is this. What God is doing in your life can't be denied, only ignored, and sooner or later, even they won't be able to hide from it. One of the most painful truths you'll ever face is this. Some people can't stand to be around you when you're doing well. They smile in your storms, but they go silent in your sunshine. They disappear when you rise and suddenly reappear when you fall. That's not friendship. That's not love. That's jealousy. And it runs deeper than words because it's not just what they say. It's when they choose to show up and, more importantly, when they choose to walk away. You see, someone who truly loves you, someone who wants the best for you, doesn't vanish when God starts elevating your life. They don't grow distant just because you stepped into your season. Real people, godly people, will clap when you win, even if they're still waiting for their breakthrough. But the jealous heart can't do that. It's too wounded, it's too insecure. It can't celebrate your victories because your blessing reminds them of what they believe they're lacking. And so they pull away, not to protect their peace, but to protect their pride. Have you ever noticed how some people used to be close, used to call, used to cheer you on, but the moment your life began to change, their energy changed too? They used to support you when you were struggling. They were present when you were low, broken, or confused. But the moment God started answering your prayers, the moment doors began to open and favor began to flow, they faded. You didn't even do anything wrong. You didn't boast. You didn't brag. You were just blessed, and that alone was enough to stir something bitter in their spirit. Because to them, your joy feels like their judgment. Your progress feels like a reminder that they've been standing still. Your peace convicts them of their chaos. So they withdraw, not because of something you did, but because of something they never did. You moved forward and they stayed where it was safe. You obeyed and they hesitated. You trusted God in the wilderness and he brought you out, but they are still wandering, still wondering, still wishing. And instead of seeing your breakthrough as a testimony, they treat it like a threat. But let me tell you something. When someone walks away from your success, don't chase them, because God is not building your future on the foundation of people who can't handle your growth. If they couldn't celebrate you in this chapter, they don't belong in the next one. If your light makes them retreat, they were never meant to walk beside you in the brightness of what's coming. And just as they disappear when you shine, they'll show up again when you struggle, not to help you, not to restore you, but to feel better about themselves, because your weakness makes them feel strong. Your brokenness makes them feel whole. Your fall comforts their pride. They might not say it out loud, but deep inside, they're more at peace when you're in pieces. That's what jealousy does. It finds satisfaction in your suffering and unease in your success. But I came to tell you, don't let that discourage you. Don't let it harden your heart. Don't let their absence in your high moments make you question your worth. Because the truth is, sometimes God allows people to walk away not as punishment to you, but as protection from them. He sees what you don't. He hears the conversations behind your back. He knows the motives behind the masks, and when someone's heart can't handle your harvest, God will remove them before their envy turns into sabotage. You don't need an audience to be anointed. You don't need a crowd to be called. You don't need everyone to understand your assignment. As long as God is with you, you're never alone, even when people leave. And when the wrong ones walk out, it only makes more room for the right ones to walk in. People who don't compete but uplift, who don't criticize but encourage, who don't shrink in your light but shine right alongside you. So the next time someone disappears when you're doing well, don't let it break you, let it build you. Let it remind you that favor attracts friction, elevation exposes envy, and not everyone who started with you is meant to stay. God will surround you with people who can handle your purpose, who can bless your breakthrough, who can rejoice when you rejoice and stand when you stand. Because when you step into what God has for you, you don't need the approval of the jealous, you just need the presence of the faithful. Jealousy is a quiet storm. It doesn't always show up in confrontation or criticism. Sometimes it hides behind a smile. Sometimes it walks beside you, clapping in public and competing in private. One of the most dangerous signs that someone is extremely jealous of you is that they pretend to support you while secretly trying to outdo you. They'll act like they're cheering you on, but in their heart, they're keeping score. You think you're walking together, but they've turned the journey into a race, and only they know it. This kind of silent competition is hard to spot because it's wrapped in kindness. They'll compliment you one moment, then try to one-up you the next. You share a win, they share a bigger one. You mention a breakthrough, they casually mention a blessing of their own. Always just slightly ahead, always just a little louder. They don't celebrate you to lift you. They acknowledge you just enough to make sure you don't forget they're still in the picture. Their encouragement isn't rooted in love, it's rooted in insecurity. They don't want to see you fall, not really, but they don't want you to rise higher than them either. So they keep pace, not because they're inspired, but because they're afraid to be left behind. And so they compete, not with your enemies, but with you, while calling it friendship. That's the danger, that's the deception. They act like they're with you, but they're secretly measuring their worth against your progress. That's what jealousy does. It can't rest in its own purpose, so it tries to outrun yours. It's not satisfied with God's plan for their life because they're too focused on what God is doing in yours. And when someone is jealous, they're not inspired by your growth, they're threatened by it. Instead of asking God, how can I grow? They ask themselves, how can I stay ahead of them? And that's when the competition begins. They don't say it out loud, but it shows in the way they always have to be the first, always have to be the loudest, always have to remind everyone what they're doing. They can't let you have a moment without making sure they're in it too. And if you're not careful, you'll start to question yourself. You'll start to wonder if you're doing too much. If your light is shining too bright, if your success is making people uncomfortable. But hear me, you don't need to shrink to make others feel safe. You don't need to hide what God is doing in your life to keep someone else from feeling small. If someone feels the need to compete with you, they've already forgotten who they are. Because people who know their purpose don't need to copy yours. People who walk with God don't need to run against his children. There's no finish line in the kingdom of heaven, just obedience, just faithfulness, just showing up every day and saying, here I am. Lord, use me. And if someone can't support you without secretly trying to surpass you, then they're not walking in love, they're walking in jealousy. And that kind of relationship will always be fragile because the moment you succeed beyond their comfort, they'll either withdraw or try to tear you down. They'll start questioning your motives, doubting your integrity, criticizing your journey, not because you did something wrong, but because they can't handle the reality that you're doing something right. You have to guard your spirit. You have to discern the difference between those who are truly for you and those who are simply trying to keep up with you. The ones who are for you will rejoice when you rejoice. They won't try to outshine you, they'll shine with you. They won't make your victories about them, they'll make them about God. They won't compete, they'll complement, because real love doesn't compare. Real friendship doesn't compete. Real support isn't scared of your success. And if you find yourself constantly having to downplay your blessings to protect someone else's pride, ask yourself, are they really for me? Because when someone loves you, they don't just stand by you in the valley, they climb with you to the mountaintop. And when you reach it, they don't say, look what I've done too. They say, look what God has done in you. So walk in confidence, walk in boldness, walk in truth. Don't be distracted by those who clap with one hand and count with the other. Your calling is too great, your purpose is too important, and your time is too valuable to be spent competing with people who were never meant to be your rivals. Let them race, let them measure, let them chase. But as for you, keep walking with God. Keep doing what He called you to do, because in His will, there's no competition, only completion. Jealousy often hides in the shadows of humor. One of the clearest signs that someone is extremely jealous of you is when they start making jokes that aren't really jokes. You know the kind, those little jabs dressed up as laughter, those sarcastic remarks that sting a little too much, those so-called funny comments that always seem to come after you share something you're proud of. They smile when they say it, but the truth is buried just beneath the surface. It's not light-hearted, it's not innocent. It's envy wearing a mask of humor. They'll say things like, oh, look at you now, with a laugh, but there's tension in their voice. They'll joke, don't forget us when you're famous. But you can't hear the insecurity tucked behind the words. They'll tease, you must think you're better than us now, and try to play it off like it's all in good fun. But if you pay attention, you'll realize laughter is hollow and the tone is sharp. That's not a joke, that's a warning. It's their way of expressing what they're too afraid to admit. that your progress unsettles them. It's subtle, but it's damaging because humor has a way of disarming us. It catches us off guard. We're taught not to take it personally. They're just playing. Don't be so sensitive. But inside, you feel it. You feel that small twist in your spirit, that quiet discomfort that says something isn't right. That's discernment. That's the Spirit of God nudging you, saying, pay attention to the fruit, not just the tone. Because people will say things in jest that they'd never have the courage to say in truth. And when jealousy speaks, it often uses the disguise of a joke so it won't be challenged. You have to be wise enough to hear the heart behind the humor. Some people use jokes not to make you laugh, but to make themselves feel better. Because when they see you rising, they feel like they're shrinking. And instead of growing alongside you, they'd rather keep you small with sarcasm. They'll downplay your dreams, mock your ambition, poke fun at your faith, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something right. You're becoming who they always said they would be, and now the weight of their own excuses is heavier than they want to admit. And here's the hard part. They might not even realize they're doing it. That's how deep jealousy runs. It seeps into the soul and comes out sideways. It twists compliments into competition. It hides behind laughs and hides in pauses between their words. They don't say, I'm jealous. They say, oh wow, you really think you can do that? And follow it with a chuckle. But the message is clear. Stay small, don't get too confident, don't make me feel uncomfortable with your growth. But my friend, God did not call you to shrink. He didn't anoint you to apologize for your anointing. He didn't bless you so you could hide your blessing behind false humility. When he puts something in your hands, you honor him by stewarding it with boldness, not fear. You don't have to defend your calling to people who make jokes to cope with their own lack of direction. You don't need to explain your journey to people who mock what they don't understand. You are not the problem. Your light is not the issue. Their discomfort is not your burden to carry. If someone chooses to laugh at what God is doing in your life, let them laugh. But don't let their laughter silence your testimony. Don't let their sarcasm shut down your vision. Don't let their jokes make you question your purpose. And if you have to walk alone for a season, so be it. Sometimes God will separate you, not because people hate you, but because their hidden envy would eventually hinder you. He sees what they say behind closed doors. He hears the laughter that carries bitterness, and in his mercy, he'll pull you out of environments where your faith is mocked, your growth is resented, and your destiny is joked about. Not to isolate you, but to protect you. So stand tall, speak boldly. Don't dim your joy just because someone else can't celebrate it. Don't laugh along just to keep the peace. And don't mistake sarcasm for sincerity. Test every spirit. Know who's truly for you. And when the joking gets too familiar, too sharp, too consistent, listen carefully. Because what people laugh about often reveals what they resent the most. When the joke stop being funny and start feeling like arrows, it's time to recognize them for what they really are. Jealousy doesn't always shout, sometimes it laughs. There's something you begin to notice over time when you're growing, when you're following the path God has placed before you, when you start bearing fruit in silence. You start to see that not everyone claps when you win. Not everyone reaches out when you share good news. And one of the clearest signs that someone is extremely jealous of you is this: they go silent during your success. Not because they're too busy, not because they missed it, but because deep down, they cannot handle the fact that you're walking in the very thing they only talk about. When you were hurting, they were there. When you were confused, they offered advice. But now that you're healing, now that doors are opening and prayers are being answered, they don't say a word. It's not that they didn't see the blessing. It's not that they forgot to reply. It's that your victory feels too heavy for their pride to carry. Jealousy doesn't always look like loud criticism. Sometimes it sounds like silence in the moments that matter most. It looks like a blank stare when you expected a celebration. It shows up in a cold shoulder when you were hoping for a warm embrace. God can bless you so much that the people you thought would always be there begin to disappear, not because you wronged them, but because your life begins to expose what they never dealt with in theirs. Your favor becomes a mirror to their frustration. Your joy reminds them of the emptiness they tried to hide, and instead of rising with you, they retreat into silence not as an accident, but as a choice. Because some people would rather see you struggle than see you succeed beyond their level of comfort. And the thing about that kind of silence is, it's not just quiet, it's heavy. It can weigh on your spirit if you're not careful. You start asking yourself, did I do something wrong? Did I say too much? Am I making them uncomfortable? You begin shrinking your joy just to avoid being alone in your celebration. But you must remember, it's not your job to silence your blessing for the sake of someone else's insecurity. What God is doing in your life is not something to hide, it's something to honor. Let me tell you something hard but holy. Some people go quiet because they can't fake support forever. Their silence is their truth, their absence is their confession. And when someone cannot bring themselves to rejoice when you rejoice, it reveals a sickness in their spirit that only God can heal. But it's not your job to fix that. It's not your burden to carry their brokenness while you're carrying the weight of your calling. Sometimes their silence is the very confirmation you need that you've outgrown the season they were part of. You don't need applause to keep moving forward. You don't need validation from people who only show up when you're down. And you certainly don't need to slow down just to match the pace of someone who stopped walking. The truth is, silence can be a gift. It exposes motives, it reveals hearts, and it teaches you who's really with you, not just in the wilderness, but also in promised land. You see, when Jesus performed miracles, the crowd gathered. But when he was betrayed, it wasn't the crowd that stayed, it was a few. And even among the few, not all remained loyal. That's the lesson. Not everyone who walks with you will worship with you. And as God elevates you, some will stay silent because your growth offends the part of them that refuses to grow. But, child of God, don't let that discourage you. Let it refine your focus. Let it purify your circle. Let it anchor your faith not in man's affirmation, but in God's presence. You were never meant to be sustained by human applause. You were created to walk in purpose, even if the only sound you hear is your own footsteps and the whisper of the Holy Spirit saying, "Keep going." Because when the noise fades and the support thins, God remains, and his voice is louder than 1,000 silent mouths. So if you're in a season where people you once counted on have gone quiet, if you're sensing that those you celebrated cannot celebrate you, take heart. That silence is not a loss, it's a revelation. It's heaven showing you who's aligned with your destiny and who was only a hindrance to you. Delay, let them be silent, let them distance themselves, but you keep rejoicing, keep praising, keep testifying, because the work God has started in your life is too powerful to be muted by someone else's jealousy. Their silence doesn't stop your purpose, it only proves your progress.